Just use Google Calendar. Gotcha, didn't I? Look, I get it, popular apps are popular for a reason, but that doesn't mean there aren't equally valid alternative ways of doing things. So if you consider yourself to be a little neurospicy and you just haven't been able to find apps that click with the way your brain works, well, this video is for you because today we're going over 5 different alternative apps that you probably haven't heard of yet that are gonna help you stay organized and on track. And no, one of them isn't Notion. Hey, it's Anna. Welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new here. If you're someone who has trouble sticking to a morning routine or even just remembering what your morning routine is, then you will love the first app on this list, which is Routinery. Routinery is a routine app that combines the best of checklists and timers to almost gamify your daily routines. It's pretty similar to the Pomodoro technique, if you've ever heard of that, or any sort of checklist app like Apple Notes, Notion, or maybe you've been using Google Calendar to track your routines like I have. And when you first sign up for the app, it's going to give you a little bit of a questionnaire or survey to kind of get you started. And it'll suggest a routine for you. And of course, you can go in and customize that later with different tasks, times, etc. But when it comes time to doing your routine, so for example, a morning routine, you're going to press start and it'll guide you through sort of this focus mode where you only see one task at a time, and then there's a timer and you can either check it off, move on to the next one. You can also have an auto start if you want to just have these go through on their own. And there's also a page to see your streaks as well. I also really like this one feature. I think some people might find it annoying, but it works for me. They have like a verbal cue once you've overran your limit. So let's say you were gonna spend 5 minutes making coffee and the 5 minutes has gone over. It'll still keep it on that task if you don't have auto run on, but it'll start to say, hey, it's been a minute since you completed this task. Hey, it's been 5 minutes since you completed this task. So if you're someone who tends to go over and then you forget you're going over, it kind of bothers you a lot until you move on to the next thing or just, decide to turn off entirely. I personally find that very, very helpful. I think in general, one of the hardest things about ADHD is time blindness, which is essentially just your inability to estimate time accurately. So you might overestimate how long something takes, or more commonly, at least for me, underestimate how long something takes. And this app helps so much with that. And a lot of the times we kind of get sucked into this hyper productivity mode of like miracle mornings. And there was a period of time where I made a checklist and told myself in the mornings, I'm gonna do a cold shower and then meditate and then journal and then plan my tasks for the day, answer emails, go for walks, read for 30 minutes, take notes on what I read. But once you start actually going through it, you realize, hey, this walk actually takes me 30 minutes, reading actually takes me 30 minutes, journaling takes me 30 minutes, and now you've created like a 3-hour morning routine for yourself without even realizing that from the start. And then you end up like in this chaos in the morning where you always feel like you're behind and you're rushing and you're skipping the things that you said you were gonna do. I mean, maybe this is just me, but I think it's a common thing that a lot of us experience. I also think this really helps you stay more in the moment. As much as I am a fan of time blocking and, being hyper organized to keep track of myself, sometimes it can be a little annoying if you have to go through and change your time blocks down to like 10, 15 increments just because it took you, an extra 5 minutes to get out of the house, or you spend an extra 5 minutes getting changed. Whereas if you use an app like this, you can kind of just go on autopilot and not really worry about it. It just tells you what you're doing, tells you how long it's taking, and you just click next when you're done. I also think this really helps with motivation in starting your day too, just because having all these little tasks that you can check off and feel accomplished from builds this positive momentum. Now, there are a couple downsides to this as well. No app is perfect. The one thing is that this has been around for a few years, but I do think it's still kind of like in a beta mode, or at least it's run by people who are not very serious about creating like a whole tech company, which is fine. But with that comes bugs. Lots of bugs, lots of crashes, UX errors, color contrast is not compliant, and in general, the whole app feels very out of the box to me, which I don't think is a deal breaker, but as a designer, I hate having these like really ugly stock icons everywhere. Maybe I just asked for too much, I don't know. But the only other thing I would worry about is if you're someone who can't have your phone next to you when you wake up or go to bed, like you keep it in another room to keep yourself from getting distracted, then that is another con, because if you have something like paper, I don't know what people use other than phone and paper. Anyway, it's gonna require you to use your phone. So that's something to consider. Now cost, it is free for the most part, but there are limitations. You can only have 2 routines. And I think you can change the icons if you upgrade to the paid plan, which seems kind of silly. There's a few other things there as well. It's not terribly expensive. I want to say it's $27.49, so about $2 a month. If you want to pay for it, you can, but if you don't feel like it, free is perfectly enough. Now this next app is one that I've had my eye on for quite a while now, so I was very excited when they reached out to me for a partnership. They're called xtiles. They do brand themselves as a crossover between Notion and Miro, but I like to consider it as more of a blend with Notion and bullet journaling. Just because bullet journaling was one of those things, or is one of those things, I guess, I used to do, I don't do it anymore. But one of the biggest draws to it was just how customizable it was. I mean, you truly had so much control over the structure and what it looked like, because at the end of the day, it was a piece of paper, so you could literally do anything. And of course, Notion does have a lot of customization features. That's one of the reasons it's so popular. But I find that a lot of it is simultaneously technically difficult and also very limiting. It's something that has frustrated a lot of people. It doesn't really frustrate me anymore just because I've probably spent like 1,000 hours learning about Notion, so it's easier for me to do things. But if you're someone who finds Notion very cumbersome or frustrating and it makes you want to just like toss your laptop out the window, then I definitely suggest you check out xtiles, because it's exactly like Notion, but just so much smoother and so much simpler and more joyful to work with. And I'll show you what I mean. So two of the main concepts in xtiles are canvases and tiles, hence the name. This is pretty similar to pages and blocks if you're familiar with Notion. So if we add a new blank page here, you can see this canvas looks very similar to what you would expect in like a bullet journal. There's even the whole grid system. But instead of things being limited to certain areas, when you draw, it can be any shape and any size. So I can just go ahead and put these anywhere. It's not like they have to be in certain columns or organized in a certain way. And if I want to move them, then everything kind of gets automatically moved around to fit it. To me, this is a much more intuitive way of building than blocks in Notion, as much as I love them. I think it takes a lot less technical know-how to understand this, which I very much appreciate. And then when you create a tile, you can put a title on it. So my tile, you can just simply write, here's a note. You can add different types of blocks here where there could be like a task. You can add an image if you want. You can add a table. And you can see there's headings, there's quotes, dividers, nested notes, nested pages, colors, audio, pretty much anything you would need here. And if you're familiar with databases, they do have something similar here. So when you open a new page, you could do a gallery view, a board view, calendar, table. So for example, they have these templates already embedded in here, and I just created a recipe page. And now you can see all of these tiles that are organized as a gallery. And there's two other features that I have been very impressed with. One of them is the ability to create groups between your pages and tabs. So let's say I wanted all of my vision board and goals to be in one group together. I can say add to group, and this will be all my 2024 stuff, change the color, and then I can say add page to group. I'm gonna add this too. And now you can see all of these pages have been added to a single tab. So this is just a really nice way to organize everything so you don't have just like a bunch of tabs going horizontally forever. The other thing that I think is really, really smart, and I wish Notion had this, is the concept of collections. If you use capacities, it's pretty similar to that. It's called object-based programming databases. I forget the exact term, but if you click on any of these tiles and you say add to collection, we can create a new collection here. Let's say favorites. So now you can see this tile has been added right here. And it's also still back in this original 2024 goals page. And there's a little notification saying that this has been added to favorites. And let's say I went to year in review and I want this in there as well. Let's see, maybe my favorite things of the year. Now these show up here. This is basically like a tag that works across all of your different tiles and pages. And it's one of the things that I find most limiting in Notion, because when you have databases, that information can't be recalled in a third place. So let's say we have, a calendar with all of my work events and a calendar with all of my personal events. There's no way in Notion to take both of those and see them in one place. You can only see the information within a database, and this solves that issue just so flawlessly. And speaking of combining, they actually have a universal calendar feature, which it should not blow my mind, but I think this is something that's missing from so many apps. So let's say you had a task on, this home page, and I want to give it a due date of the 4th. I'm going to give this task a due date the 17th. And now I'm going to go to a different page. Say my year in review. What do I need to improve? Stop eating so much sugar. If this was a task that I could complete, then I could also put a date there. And now you can see the tasks from each page, even though they're part of different tiles, part of different canvases, they all show up on this calendar page. And the same thing also happens if you go to My Tasks. You're gonna see everything from all your different tiles and pages. And there's one last feature here I want to point out, which is the inbox. If you're familiar with the concept of an inbox from David Allen's Getting Things Done, this is very similar. It's pretty much just a catch-all that's very easy to use on the go. So if you have your phone, you want to use like a web clipper to just clip an article you want to look at later, or maybe you have like a quick note or idea or task when you're out at dinner and you don't really want to process it right now, but you want to make sure it gets captured for later. You put this here, and then when you get to your desktop, your computer, you're able to go and put it in the right place. Again, I just find the whole way this app is built to be very intuitive, very fun to use. There's not a lot of startup time in learning how to use it. I mean, come on, you're literally just like, it's bullet journaling all over again. I don't know, something about just building these boxes is like very satisfying to me. They also have a lot of templates that you can choose from if you don't want to build things from scratch. So there's plenty here that you can just pop in. The community is pretty active, so people will build stuff and just put it here to share. So you can see, 30-day plans, there's a business planner, second brain. Going back to the whole tagging collections feature, I think that makes building a second brain and taking notes in xtiles so much better than Notion, because you're able to actually mix and match and organize different topics instead of having things all just in one database. Honestly, I would say there aren't really that many downsides to using this. The only one is no offline mode, but a lot of apps don't have that nowadays. So unless that's a deal breaker for you, I think it's definitely worth a try, especially again, if you're someone who has been routinely frustrated by Notion, you don't want to put in the work to learning it. This is a great way to get started and have, like your whole Life OS system in one place without losing hair in the process. Now, in terms of cost, there is a premium version you can opt into. It's only about $4 to $10 per month, depending on the total length that you sign up for. It does include some pretty cool features like Google Calendar integration, unlimited storage, reoccurring tasks. So if those are things that you find really important, it might be worth looking into. And if you'd like to give them a try, then feel free to check out the link in my description to get started. Now, number 3 on our list is Arc. And if you are somebody who keeps a lot of tabs open on your computer and also in your brain, then this is probably something that you're gonna find very useful. I have had my eye on them for a few years now, and I only just recently downloaded it, but it's been such a game changer in getting me focused on work. I mean, who am I kidding? I'm still distracted, but it helps, okay? Now you might be wondering, why are we talking about a web browser? Chrome, Safari, Firefox. Does anyone use Firefox anymore? All the same things, doesn't matter, doesn't help us be productive. You're wrong. Arc is what a web browser should be, but most of them aren't because they're bogged down in the minutia and complications of being owned by a major corporation. They completely threw out all of the traditional expectations that came with building a web browser and pretty much just started from scratch and thought, what would it look like if we were to actually browse the internet in a way that made sense and wasn't just a copycat and iteration from the 1990s? The main difference is that they took the concept of tabs, and instead of just having them spread out with like 100 little tiny X's and you can't read what's on it anymore, they supercharged them and organized them in a way that actually makes sense. So instead of having all of our tabs across the top like you see in every single browser it's ever been created, they instead put it vertically because there's more space, easier to read, and they also made it much easier to organize them. So these ones up here are all pinned, and the ones down here, if I create like a new tab and I go to Google, you're gonna see it shows up down here. You can also exit them, just like how a normal tab works. And they also have this concept of spaces. So you can see this is my personal space right now. This is another space that I automatically created for Albie because I think he was in my Chrome profile users when I imported this. But I could go and make my own tabs. Don't look at this, we need to redo our website. And I could create my own pins and my own favorites up here. And I can switch between the two. This can be really nice if you have, separate work, personal, different profiles you want to use for different contexts and you don't want them to bleed into each other. Overall, I think this really helps keep your digital workspace clean when you're trying to get work done. There have been so many times where I'm working on something, I need to search something on Google, I go to search Google, but then I see this open article that I was gonna read, and then I start reading the article and it reminds me of something else to search, and then I start looking at a YouTube video because I have a question about something, and then I go on the YouTube homepage, and then I see all these other videos and I start watching that, and then an hour has passed and I've gone down this rabbit hole of various side quests when I was trying to do something else entirely. What's also really nice is they let you import all of your Chrome bookmarks and extensions into here as well. I have a lot of them pinned up here that I use, and I can go here and see the rest. They also have a picture-in-picture mode. You can see there's this playlist that I made, and if I play this and I go somewhere else, like back here, you'll see this little picture-in-picture thing happens. And this can be nice if you're listening to somebody talk in a video and you wanna go like search something, but you don't wanna stop the video, you still wanna see them. One of my other favorite features is the split screen. So let's say I'm working in this xtiles dashboard and there's something I wanna search, but I need to see my list of things to do as I'm searching. I can right click on here and say add split view, open up Google. Amazing! And now I can interact with both these pages separately. And the last thing about this that I think is really fun is that you can customize your tabs. I can right click on here, go to customize page, new boost, and now I get to pick different colors for my YouTube homepage. I'm changing both the text colors and accent colors as well as the background. And then you can also go in and actually change the fonts as well, which is pretty wild. Whenever I go back and switch between these tabs, this is always going to have this boost applied to it. Just a way to make, everyday life a little bit more fun. As far as costs go, it is completely free right now, although they do have something called Max, which you can opt into. I suspect this is a beta test for paid features to come, so don't get too attached if you want to keep using this for free. Otherwise, the only downside I can really think of is that it wasn't very intuitive to get started. I actually couldn't figure out how to open a new tab for the longest time. And again, I think part of that is just to be expected. They are creating something that is very different from what we're used to using. So if you're someone who's used the internet for a very long time or since you were a kid, then obviously it's going to take a little while to get used to using it in a different way. And the only other thing is that to my knowledge, there's not a bookmark feature. I mean, I guess you technically don't need it because you're able to organize all of your tabs in a way that kind of gets rid of the need for bookmarks. But if you're someone who has thousands of links that you're trying to save, you might run into performance issues and you might prefer to have a traditional bookmark organizer instead, which brings me to Raindrop. So what Arc does for tabs, Raindrop does for bookmarks. You're probably pretty familiar with this process where you see something you like, you go into the extension, you click on it, and there's an option to save it, right? But the magic is in how everything is organized. You can sort everything into collections and give them tags. So here's a collection. I had one that was wish list. Maybe I add pants, purchase, clothing. You can also choose to put a reminder if it's something you want to come back to. And then when I go back to my Raindrop homepage, which I have pinned at the top of my Arc, we get this beautiful homepage with all of our bookmarks, all sorted into collections, and there's filters for images, articles, videos. You can look at tags. There's also plenty of different ways to view them. So if I go into here, I can create cards instead. I could do a mood board. You can also choose to sort them by sites, by date. And if you're someone who keeps a lot of bookmarks, that's critical to be able to sort through them easily and filter them. I think some of the biggest benefits to using this, other than just having all your bookmarks organized in a very satisfying way. Number one, this is technically a web app and can also be a desktop app. So instead of it being attached to a certain profile, for example, in Chrome, my bookmarks might be attached to my Google profile. That's fine if all you do is use the internet at home, but what if you're at work? You can very easily just log on to Raindrop and see all of your bookmarks from there. And I know what you're thinking, Wesley, you're such a Notion nerd, why don't you just keep all of your bookmarks in there? I'm just kidding, you probably weren't thinking that. Statistically speaking, you probably haven't watched any of my other videos. but you should. No, but really, I have tried keeping all my bookmarks in Notion. I do still keep some articles there that I want to take notes on, but for the most part, I'm trying to keep my Notion clean for now and not have a lot of trash floating everywhere. Plus, if something is going to be a URL, I'd rather just keep it where I'm actually going to view it, which is in my browser. We're just trying to reduce friction and make our lives easier here. Similar to Arc, I think Raindrop is a great option if you're someone who struggles to stay on task because you have to use the internet for work. Between the two, I definitely feel less of a need to look at something right away, and I know that it's going to be captured and put in the place I need it for later when I do have time to get to it. So one thing that has bothered me though is I tend to get a preview error, and this might be a site issue, not necessarily a Raindrop issue, but it would be nice if the previews work more often than they do. But luckily, it's completely free to try it out. You can upgrade to a paid tier, which comes out to about $2 a month, I believe, but it mostly just includes some extra backup options and AI. And now last up for today is an app that you may have already heard of if you've been watching my channel for a while, and that is Akiflow. Akiflow is a task management and calendar app that specializes in integrations, and they've also saved my life. Not to be dramatic. You can kind of think of it like Google Calendar, only with much more powerful time blocking and task features. The main interface is made up of tasks on the left side and a calendar on the right side, and you can integrate all of your tasks and calendars from Outlook, Google, Notion, Slack, anything you use. And once you do have everything integrated, you can drag your tasks directly onto the calendar or even create time blocks for batching tasks and put all of your tasks into there. This is really helpful because a lot of people with ADHD, including myself, struggle with this sense of overwhelm and anxiety when it comes to managing different parts of our lives. And this is especially exacerbated with information fragmentation, which is a fancy term for having all of your tools and notes and to-dos all spread out in different places. And while a neurotypical person might find this mildly annoying, for someone with ADHD, it can be insanely frustrating because it's so hard to remember where each piece of information is stored and how to access it efficiently at any given time. And because our working memories are trash, it makes it all the more likely that you're gonna forget something if it's not directly in front of you. And that's why aggregation apps in general are so crucial. I also love that this app takes such a visual approach to time management, because if I don't see how long something physically, temporally takes, then the time blindness issue kicks in again. And I do appreciate that the interface is very simple, very clean, so you're not gonna get distracted by a bunch of little doodads and widgets everywhere. The only downside, I would say, is the cost, which can be anywhere from $19 to $34 depending on what subscription plan you choose. It is steep, okay, I'll tell you. It's something that a lot of people are not used to paying for. I think most apps in this category tend to be either free or like maybe $5 a month at most. But I do think it's reasonable for what they're delivering, okay? Hear me out. So if you're not familiar with how app integrations work, they are leveraged with something called an API, which is essentially a virtual key that an app can give to a developer, so they get to access the code base or the backend, and they can start creating their own additional features that aren't natively integrated into the app already. So for example, Notion doesn't have a Google Calendar integration, but you can use an API add-on from a company like TwoSync, where they've built their own feature that lets you do that. Every other company that's ever developed something with an API almost exclusively charges for this service, because every time you request information from an API, usually that company is going to charge the developer for it. So you can imagine, with all of the integrations that Akiflow offers, it costs a lot for them to retain the average user. And if I had to wager a guess, that's probably why they charge a lot to sustain their business. I would say if you're not someone who has all of your information stored in a bunch of different places, like you just use Google Calendar and a notebook, then you probably don't need it. It could be overkill. But if you are spread out all over the internet, then I suggest you give them a try. I hope you enjoyed today's video and that you discovered at least one new app that you're excited to try. You can find the link to all of them down in the description below. And I'm also still working on a ADHD-friendly Notion system that's going to be released some point later this year. You can sign up for the waitlist, and that will be linked in the description as well. And other than that, I will see you in the next one. Bye.